Hey everybody, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andy Polk with FDRA. I want to thank all of you for joining today for this super important topic. As we go through the presentation today, these are the fun webinars I like to do with Centric because we just talk about what's happening and share ideas and knowledge, things that you can compare yourself to and think about your operations and what you're doing, how you can do things a little bit better to do business better. As we go through this today, down in the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing, little Q&A there. So as we go through things and you have questions, if you want to drop that in, I'll try to pull those up real time to have the conversation. So as we go along, just feel free to chime in there and we'll see those there. As always, I do want to thank Centric Software for sponsoring and powering these conversations that we have with industry leaders. I think many of you know Centric in terms of their PLM paralysis and the number of brands that they have across the industry using PLM, and more coming in to using PLM now in this day and age, trying to manage the chaos that is footwear sourcing, supply chain, sales, etc. And not just PLM too. There's been a new acquisition that they just went through. I don't want to cover it in depth because they just had it, and I'm not going to put Matt on the spot about that. But if you want to just Google Centric, acquiring a new company, take a look at that on the Google, because I think that's quite important. But as we start the conversation today, I do want to introduce you to Roger and Matt. Matt, I'll start with you because we've done these before together, and it's funny, we were doing these webinars for a couple of years, and it's the first time we saw each other was in Portland. At our trade and sustain, and it was so much fun just to see you and chat with you in person really quickly. So maybe you can just give your background or remind people how much knowledge you have in the footwear space.
Sure.
A little bit about Centric and its work with the industry.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. And that was awesome to be in the same room with people for a change. It was fantastic. It's something I miss. So as Andy said, my name is Matt Knockery. I'm the sales director for Western North America for Centric Software. I've been with Centric 8 years now. Prior to that, my footwear background, I was a new product operations director at Crocs. You all have a pair, even if you don't admit it, you might have 3 or 4. Fantastic company, really forward thinking. And that opened my eyes to PLM. And that's how I discovered Centric, learned about Centric, implemented Centric, used Centric, and then had the opportunity to join Centric, where, as Andy said, our growth has been spectacular. We have 650 plus, the final numbers classified yet, of customers globally, which gives us almost 7,000 brands being managed in Centric. Obviously, not all of those are footwear, but we have a tremendous footwear customer base. And real briefly, one of the things that makes Centric very unique is our concept of industry best practices. So, and this whole event is not a Centric sales pitch, but why I'm coming to you today and trying to share some of these insights is because when you implement Centric, it's Centric business consultants that do the implementation, and they're able to take those learnings every time they do a new implementation, obviously scrub them of anything proprietary, but apply best practices to other brands. And that manifests itself. The story I always tell is when I was implementing Centric at Crocs, my business consultant from Centric, I learned very quickly, if he asked me for the 3rd time, "Are you sure that's the best way to do this?" That was his very polite code for saying, "You're kind of being a moron, and I'm going to show you a better way to do this." Right. And so we try to still maintain that mindset through every implementation we do. Just try to make things better, smoother, create that single source of truth so people can navigate the untold reams of data that go along with footwear development.
Yeah, well said. Roger, who is our keynote or our guest speaker today from the industry perspective. Roger, if you want to introduce yourself really quickly to the audience, and we're going to hop right into these. The times are challenging, so we got a lot of good stuff to get into.
Sure. My name is Roger Kitch. Thanks for having me here today. I am the Senior Vice President of Operations at BBC International. Obviously, we are design, source, and sell footwear, license model, own brands, sourced businesses across multiple categories, multiple genders, multiple brands, and Prior to BBC, I actually worked on the retail side of the house as a GMM, DMM at places like Sports Authority, Office Depot, Models. So I know kind of both sides of the table. Then I've been with BBC for about 10 years now, believe it or not. Time flies.
That's awesome. Yeah. And your background's really important because in this day and age, you got to know both sides, right? Especially, I mean, we'll talk about the I word, which I think is a curse word at this point, but inventory. It was inflation earlier, and then it's the I switched to a different I. It's still, but Roger, as we get into holiday season and then looking forward to 23, what are some of the current major headaches you're seeing right now? Maybe it is that I word.
I mean, we can't, that's the multiple elephants in the room or the warehouse or wherever they are, right? It's the I word for sure. It's, obviously, we've all seen the slides that the FDRA produced or whatever, the level of inventory versus the sales, and that obviously creates, a whole gumming of the system back to and through the supply chain, back all the way to, all the way through our production line. So, it's navigating what we currently own, navigating our relationship with our customers and helping them to be partners with them through what's going on their floors or in their warehouses. But it's also being prudent about, our financial responsibility as a company, and what we have risk tolerance for, or, truly making strategic decisions about our inventory plan, our design plan for 2023 and into 2024. All of those things are contributing to kind of how we navigate the I word, right?
Yeah.
Which is our inventory. And, and it also involves being partners with all of our partners, whether it's our warehouse partners, our factory partners, our freight forwarding partners, everybody who's involved in this, has to be part of kind of the conversation of where we are with inventory, what our game plan is, and how we're gonna work through it. So that is definitely the number 1 through number 10 things that's going on.
Well, I think it stems to the fact that we're hitting an age, and I've said this over and over again over the last year, and even in COVID, is like, we can't keep managing systems with Excel, right? It's a great place to hold data, but it's not going to tell you anything, and it doesn't connect. You still need a person sitting there making sense of it and putting it all into a system and trying to figure it out. And I feel like to make the right call on pricing and warehousing, you have to have a lot of conversations and you have to look at a lot of data, and you need to have it centralized. And that's why PLM is so attractive, I think, to a lot of folks trying to optimize what they're doing and their decision making. And Matt, I'll bring you on this too, because obviously you guys serve, I don't know how, maybe 30 or 40 footwear companies and brands easily in this market. Is this the same conversations you're having with other clients in the footwear space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good segue into PLM, because typically when you think of a PLM system, you probably don't think of inventory management, right? You've got your warehouse management systems, all those other tools that are doing that, and rightly so. The right data in the right place is a core cornerstone of any kind of digital transformation. There's a lot of buzzwords all at once, but and I like what Roger said about the design plan for 2023 and going forward. In past lives, when I was involved with merchandising product lines, if you're trying to be efficient and profitable, one of the first things you want to do is maximize any inventory you have. You want to identify your carry forward, your go forward styles, the things that are routinely good sellers, good revenue generators, bring high profit margins, those things. And without a PLM system, and no false modesty, without Centric, let's be serious here. I'm heavily biased towards the product I sell, and that's the reason I sell it. But without a good PLM system, you don't have that single source of truth. So when you think of PLM, it's really where product is born before it goes out into the marketplace. The first step in line planning or merchandising is determining, well, what do you have on hand? What do you need to move through? What moves itself? I mean, those are the golden carryovers, right? The things that are, let's add 2 new colors, but keep the 6 we have and just keep churning them because we can sell them as fast as we can make them. And then there's the white space, and my guess is going into the next year with the inventory discussions I'm having with current customers, the number of mail slots, we used to call them, or the white space on the board is going to dwindle because we're going to be cash constrained because we've invested a lot in inventory. We have a lot of inventory in the warehouse. So every one of the new styles really has to work. You don't have the bandwidth to take a flyer like you might have a couple years ago when everybody could sell anything to anyone and you could do some crazy stuff just to see if it worked. I think this year, from what I'm hearing, you're not really going to have that opportunity. So creating that single source of truth and being able to go to one system and one report and just say, hey, here's my 10 favorite styles. Well, how did they sell? What kind of margin did they bring? And how much am I sitting on? That's got to be your first step. And if you have to go to 6 different people in 6 different, well, I used to say offices, but they're probably all home now, or half of them are. Ask them for the report, and then they've got to reach out to someone and ask them for the report. By the time you're making a decision, the data is a week or 10 days old, right? And that manifests itself across almost every decision you make. So that's really our theme, our push is you've got to create that single source of truth. So we just try to find the easiest way to do that.
Yeah. And I'll bring Roger into this too, because I think what we're talking about here is the consumer situation and consumer behaviors are shifting really rapidly, and it's hard to keep up. And the economy shifting again rapidly in a different direction than we've seen, and it's hard to keep up. And these are external forces that you can't control. We have to ride the wave a lot of times on these things. But Roger, when you're looking at these issues and what Matt's talking about in inventory and that, what are some things that you can control to stay ahead of your competition or help growth? What are you guys looking at and trying to lean into is to try to, I guess, get your hands around what you can actually control and focus on? And you know, who knows what happens in 23, but at least you have your hands around what you can control and what you can mold in this environment.
Yeah, I think our first step obviously was to kind of get a handle on what we currently owned and properly grade it, right? Is to just say, okay, what is our current liability that we're sitting on? And, you know, and we literally went in many cases style by style and said, this is A, B, C, D. And each one of those grades has a game plan behind it, right? You know, and that led us to kind of where we are going to kind of design into in 2023 and beyond, because we have a timeline for each of those game plans of our, you know, and, you know, to his point, we instituted design KPIs a couple of years ago by collecting information from China and then trying to put it together over here and merging it together in one document to try to output how productive were we in our design process, you know, and it was challenging. So, you know, we've streamlined it a bit, and certainly the reason we're bringing Centric on is to do exactly that, is to get much smarter upstream of like, whether it's genders, whether it's color choices, whether it's, you know, the slippers were hot, you know, and now slippers are not. And how do we get a plan further back to understand, you know, what we're designing into and marry it up to what we currently own, to your point about carryovers and understanding what we're designing around as well. So
yeah. And let me ask you too about how important the anecdotal data is, right? Your team's always at Fannie, you're always at trade shows, you're getting feedback from the buyers in real time, but also how important is it to talk to your factory and your suppliers to hear what they're dealing with and what they're seeing too, so we got the data, but it's also, I think it's also important to point out, you got to be in these places, you got to be at the shows, listening and talking to folks.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we have a lot of partners, you know, with the brands that we work with, who also using, you know, their knowledge of kind of what their vision is of where they're going. You know, we have a lot of conversations about price points and where we want to go with price points with our brands. So we're in lockstep, and what we're presenting and what they're presenting makes sense. You know, so it's working with our brand partners, working with our retail partners to see what they're going for, working with our factory base to know what they're on the horizon. Maybe, you know, we service 85 countries. So we also have to pay attention to what, you know, this country is going for versus this country, right? So that is key in figuring out all of those things to come up with a proper merchandising plan.
You must have like a foreign exchange board behind you that's just constantly like ringing.
Exactly.
Doing a little math on the calculator as you go through that. But I do think that's interesting. You're pointing out on the pricing, right? Like from the you have to know what your supplier is thinking about and doing, and you need the data to back it up. And then you got to hear from your customer as well. Like, what are they trying to sell at the price point? Because we're seeing because we have so much inventory, we did an executive survey and we saw over the next 6 months to the next year, we're not really seeing price increases anymore. So they're seeing, back to the discounting to move it. That might shift as inventory actually moves and we get maybe back to normal. But for the most part, CEOs are saying we're not really anticipating price increases. So if you're not seeing price increases, you're not seeing margin increases, you're seeing margin decreases.
Exactly.
Matt, you got to go somewhere and find cost cuttings to make up for it. And the question I have to you, Matt, as we look at it is, how do we do that? How do we stay ahead of consumer changes and making sure we're using that data and those anecdotal information to make the right decision in this environment?
That's a really good question. And I think it's a situation where you have to be bottom up and top down simultaneously, right? You have to have your corporate plans and you have to be looking at where do we want to take the brand? Who are our key retail partners? What are we selling ourselves? Because almost everybody's omni-channel now, right? That used to be a big buzzword, but that's just how life is. We all have websites. We all sell product multiple different ways. So you have to have a plan and a goal, but at the same time, there's the old management adage or cliche, depending on how you want to look at it. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? And I would take that a little further and say, if you can't see it, you can't even measure it. So again, it goes back to our core theme of creating a single source of truth. Not only do I need to know and have access to at any time real numbers for my inventory, but I should know, did I take a position on components? Did I take did I get a good deal on 100,000 aglets? And now I got to make enough shoes to cap all those shoelaces, right? Because it happens. And what is my cost on each of those pieces? And how does that roll up to a finished good? And if I'm going to make 10,000 of something, that's one calculus. But if I'm going to sell 100,000, and that's where the top-down planning comes in because you're working with your partners, that's a different calculation, right? And that's really where we try to support our customers in this, is just creating this opportunity to see things at any level, but see them real time and see them accurately.
Yeah. And Roger, I'll bring you into this too, because I think you can tell successful companies because they know who their customer is. And are we going to see in 23 that refocus, right? We to Matt's point, it was like you throw out a flyer, you can sell a shoe, right? That you just show up with a shoe and it's going to sell. But now people are going to be a lot more weary. They're going to be a lot more cautious. They're going to be looking at their wallet more as they make purchases. So is this, from your perspective and the many years you have, is this the time and age to refocus your gaze back to your core customer and like really focus in on that too?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of been happening naturally over the last 6 months. So, we've kind of slimmed our customer base and said, let's make sure that we deliver the right product at the right time, at the right price for these guys, because they are going to, drive the future growth path, right? If we succeed here, we have a chance of going back to succeeding in a lot of other places. So, we work very closely with them, our key partners, on helping us build products that they're asking for, and that's one of the things I think we do very well, is we're agile enough that we can, work quickly and develop something that I think that will maybe fit a white space that doesn't necessarily exist unless you're knocking on the door and asking the right questions and working with your partners on a regular basis. And, the one thing PLM will help do is speed that up. And that's one of the goals of getting faster to marketplace and filling holes faster.
Yeah. And Matt, I call this the accordion economy. I try to be as clever as I can. My wife doesn't always laugh or like it, but I call it the accordion economy. So we had COVID, it scrunches down. We're coming out of it and people want to spend, so it goes back out. And now I feel like in 23, we're starting to see that trimming. We see it with tech jobs. We see it with people. There's the spending's level, but they're spending more on their credit cards. So we see credit card debt increasing, right? So at some point, that disposable income gets shrunk. So right now we're okay, but there are concerns. So I guess my point is there's constant marketplace disruptions that occur. And when people are looking at PLM, they'll think, oh, it's background, but it can help you see those disruptions occurring. It can help you make better decisions. Maybe you can just share how customers who have been using PLM for many years kind of navigate through those disruptions with PLM.
Well, good question. There's a couple ways, and I think you can attack that from two angles. There's the reactive, right? Like, how do we react to changes in the marketplace? And again, I'll go back. It's going to sound like a crutch, but having access to that data that's real time is crucial, because if you can look in your system and know, hey, and especially if you're in multi-countries, like a multinational, because you're going to have different, hopefully seasons, different tastes, different things like that. And I've done this myself in the past where we had these X many thousands of pair allocated for this region, but you know what? We're seeing demand here. The merchandisers are telling me that, the sales team is telling me that. I need to talk to the factory and reroute that to where we can use it. Okay, it's going to need, wasn't for Canada, so now I need the CA tags, right? But whatever, I can handle that through the system because I can just change the bill of materials, click, 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 get the right tags put on it. Now I can ship it there. So I think that's one way I see customers doing it. But the other way is a little bit more proactive, and it's, you can't just fall into it. But one of the things we strive to do is help customers through this access to data and process shrink their time to market. So if you are, and I lived through this myself, if your time from conception to hitting the shelves is 13 months or more, and it's with a lot of companies, it's more, then you're missing the opportunity to react to seasonal trends. Where if it's 8 or 9 months, if you can take the fluff out by seeing it and reactivating your people where they're useful, now you can react to things. And you go into back to school, for example, and you think you have a sure seller and nobody likes it. Well, great. Now you, in a 13-month or worse calendar, you've doubled down on that because you were also bullish on it. All the merchandisers were going to sell it. All the channels were going to take it. Everybody loved it. Well, now you've got 2 seasons invested in that. Whereas if you can shorten that window, and it takes time, but it's not as hard as it sounds once you can see what's going on. You shorten that window under a year, same product, go to back to school, nobody likes it, and it's showing up on all the clearance websites. Great, let's just not do that anymore, right? We learned our lesson, let's move on. So I really think there's a couple ways to approach that.
I would add to that, one of the things, our initiatives for 2024 is a much more strategic test and learn program, and that means designing fast, working with our overseas development team fast, getting it on the floor fast. If we want to try new outsoles, we want to try new upper patterns, or we want to try new things, I think retailers in times of difficult times, they shrink their point of view on what their assortment's going to be. But I think sometimes we still want to be a little creative out there in the marketplace. We want to try some new stuff and see what's possible before we do a huge leap of an investment into a future season. So we're talking about a test and learn program that would allow us to your point, speed of market, learn from the data, maybe even get it in retailers a season earlier, some key retail partners, to see whether it's going to work before we blow it out to the rest of the industry. So that is one of our initiatives for 2023. Actually, did I say 2024? 23. So
well, we're already thinking 24 because Fanny's up, right? We got to figure out what we're selling for that cycle. But Roger, I'll ask you this because I just lost my train of thought. But to that end, as you think about other pain points, you're talking about, oh, I know what I was going to say. Here we go. The people that I've talked to said, we're trying to move this inventory. We're trying to be creative. That's the biggest challenge we have right now. But also the other big challenge in the back room is the design and development of new product, because we feel like we're not going to get back in growth mode until we have something edgy, dynamic, like aesthetic, something a little
reason
bit
for being, you got to have something that has a reason and a purpose for being on a shelf and take a slot.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And you guys were talking about reducing the the development time cycle and delivery time cycle? What are some other pain points? Roger, as you guys are, right now I know you're implementing the PLM with Centric, but what are some other things that drove you to have a PLM centric, go to a centric PLM? Like, what are the other kind of pain points you're trying to address in the system?
Yeah, I think it's putting all of different systems into one. We have a separate costing system.
Yep.
We have a separate, HDS system. We have a separate system for this.
So it was all the login passwords. That's what the big problem was.
And, you hope that this system says the same as that. So the one version of the truth and putting it all in one place so that if someone makes a change further down in the development process, that we don't find out till it shows up on our retailer's shelf and we're like, oh my God, So those are the types of things for sure, is that, increasing efficiency across multiple business units, but also one version of the truth, reduce errors, and certainly the costing module within the PLM itself, and allows us to do a much better job of managing the supplier quotes, managing, to your point, white canvas across maybe multiple brands, how we're using white canvas and, and making sure we're maximizing our efficiency there. So there's a lot of things that, we're actually just beginning our user acceptance phase. So we're already starting to see how this is going to work. But we have high hopes for 2023 and seeing some of the benefits of all of those topics.
Yeah. And I know as we enter towards the end of the year and 23 is coming out, we always have staff reviews. We start looking at new KPIs, targets, and goals. So Matt, how does that, is it easier in a PLM to manage those? Is it easier to see what that, line item cost or overview cost, and are we hitting our target? Is that a big benefit of PLM that people are using for right now too, the KPM kind of exploration?
It's huge. And establishing those KPIs, you can do it in multiple ways. But before I get into that, Roger, you just reminded me of something, and I don't see it so much in footwear, but with my apparel customers, specifically in the outdoor sphere, hook and loop tape. Man, everybody finds out when they start cleaning up their libraries that they've got a lot of random hook and loop tape all over the world.
Right.
And getting that visibility to just say, you know what, we probably don't need to buy any for a couple of years if we just put all this together. And it's pennies, but pennies make dollars. Right. So it's a big deal. But your white canvas story reminded me of hook and loop. Everybody, they've got too much. So back to your real question about KPIs, though. One of the things that we do with most customers right out of the box is establish a simple target margin KPI. So as you're developing the product and you're building the product from the bottom up, from the top down, you've established what your corporate margin goals are, right? From the bottom up, you're costing on a line item basis. You know what the rivets cost, and you know what the aglets cost, and you know what the shoelaces cost. Hope you know what the shoelaces cost. That's another story. But you know what everything costs, right? And the molds, for me, it was always the molds, right? And you want to be 99% buttoned up before you start creating molds. And especially if you're going to go from 4 to 14 and half sizes and wides, now you're seriously investing some money. So you really want to know what's going on. So establishing right out of the box, and we usually do like a red light, yellow light, green light KPI that shows up on the screen to whoever needs to see it. And they can go in by line, by gender, by style, whatever they need, by season. And just, hey, if everything's green, then as of this very moment, everything's tracking towards our target margin or better. If there's a yellow dot, you're probably within 1 or 2 deviations, maybe. And if you're doing exception management, because say you're a business unit manager, you might go in and start your day by pulling up, let me see everything where the margin KPI is yellow or red. And then because you have a single source of truth, so you're pulling in from your forecasting system, or maybe you're using Centric for forecasting, we can go either way. And you say, hey, not only is this red for margins, but we've forecast 11 pair. So I'm going to be a genius and kill it right now before we open molds, right? Let's save $200,000 right now. Versus this one's a yellow, but we've got forecasts from people I trust, because you can see where the forecasts come from too, right? Because some forecasts are fantasy. Here's forecast for 400,000 units. and the margin's yellow, which means it's still savable. Let me talk to that developer. Let's see what we can do. Let's see why we're out of what we expected with this margin. Is it a factory problem? Is it a materials problem? Is it a labor? You don't know until you know. But because you have all of that data in one system, you can drill down really quickly and solve the problem. So that's another thing we really stress with customers is this exception-based management, but with all the data, sales, margin, forecast, everything.
I would add on to that is that instituting calendar down to the SKU level management, which is something that we don't have now. We build a master production calendar, design calendar across the entire seasonal base, and I have to dig deep into figuring out where we are line by line, in this case, in the red, yellow, green scenario, again, I'll know immediately by looking at a dashboard by style where we are to our calendar. And that will create a lot of efficiencies for me, for sure. I'm looking forward to that.
Calendar's a big deal. And red, yellow, green is enough, right? You can get as complicated as you want, but honestly, hey, here's my team and we got 60% in the green. Let's talk about the 40. And again, let's be strategic. Let's fix the ones that are going to drive revenue. Everything goes well, we'll come back to the passion play ones because we all like cool, unique, interesting product, but you can't always do that as your first act of the day.
Well, at least you can make that decision while you're still making the product before it gets on a ship or into a warehouse. Right. Then what are you going to do? Like spray paint the shoe green and try to sell it, while it's already in the US, or burn it or just, dump it to TJ Maxx or Marshalls or wherever. I mean, it's fascinating to hear that because then you're actually looking at risk, right? Like what's my actual, so Roger comes in every single day and looks at the yellow and the red at the start and says, here's my risk for the day. That's my focus today on these projects. He doesn't need to worry about the other things, and it probably saves him a couple hours and he gets off a little bit early and goes home and goes fishing and everybody's happy, right? That's the dream. I'll around this too, because I think what you're talking about is transparency and process in the company, right? But we also have this bigger problem in our industry is traceability within our supply chain. So we did have a question that came up on that, and we were definitely going to cover this because this is I think one of the growing reasons why people are moving towards PLM because of the ability to have all that data in one place and hopefully see throughout and have more transparency in the operations, but also with the supplier base. And Matt, the big things that are happening now for me are all around traceability, encapsulated within ESG and sustainability and things like that. But the idea that are we making sure that there's no slave labor in our supply chain at our factory that our partners is, how are we tracking our carbon emission? How are we tracking our waste emission? Like, are we tracking materials? Are they recycled? Are they bio-based? Like, how are we making decisions around that? And especially the cost of it, right? And the quantities and things like that. So, what are the conversations you're having with apparel and food? And then the whole thing is with the SEC, they're enacting rules talking about tracing down tier 1 to tier 4, which is, so deep into the supply chain. So this is every industry. So it's every customer you have. What are those conversations inside Centric and with your customers around using PLM more efficiently for traceability?
A lot and ongoing. How about that? It's a huge topic right now. And again, our central theme is to create this single source of truth. So what we typically will do is work with a given customer. Most customers have a priority list for their ESG process, right? And these are really important to me. These are secondary, and some of that's driven by government. Like you better have your FLPA Act stuff buttoned up. So that's going to be your first priority, whether you want it to be or not. Hopefully it is. And so what we try to do is provide a window into that, like everything else, is real time and transparent. So I've seen it done, and it's very much like everything. We have out of the box best practices we recommend, but then every customer has their unique needs and spin on that. So the simplest way is you have your auditors, your factory managers, whomever you're getting this data from, and they're filing documents with you. And often those are a PDF and it's signed on the floor and it says, and we even have a little segue. We have a factory management app where it will time and geostamp where the signature is taken on an iPad, so that you can't just do all your safety checks in the Kowloon Sheridan. You have to actually be on the floor, because not pointing fingers, but we've all seen this done, right? You have to do the actual inspections. But then it's a very simple process for us. And one thing I like to do is put effectivity dates into Centric on each document and actually have it remind you before that document expires. So if this factory passes this particular test and it's important to you, you put it into Centric, which is a drag and drop function, and then you can say effective until this date and have it remind you 30 days out, hey, this document's expiring. And not only do you know that that document's expiring, but it's automatically attached to every factory and every product that that document pertains to. So you don't get caught, because I think we've all been in this situation where you thought everything was on schedule and then you realized they don't have this in place, we don't have that in place, we don't have any visibility into the circular fabric cycles. I mean, there's so many millions of things you can track in there.
Right.
So I always say, start simple. If you're getting PDF reports, let's put them in the system, but let's track them. Let's make them, anyone who's seen our demos knows I'm a big fan of milestone development cycles. Let's making sure all the required documents are part of step 4 or step 3 or whatever you want your step to be in that development cycle, so that if it's not up to date, you don't go forward. You're not going to get in that situation where they're putting shoes in boxes and you realize you can't export them. Right.
Yeah.
We want to avoid that.
Can you, setting it up in the system, can you put in what your requirements are for your suppliers and then push it out to your auditors and do it that way?
Absolutely.
So you load it in, you push it out, they feed it in, and that way you're making sure you're telling them what you want, making sure you're tracking. Because I'm sure, like, as we keep going through this, right, customer requirements are changing just as much as government requirements. So all of a sudden REI is like, oh, I need to know all your leather working group and everybody's got to do this, or I need to verify that this is recycled content through GRS standards through Textile Exchange. So that's a new thing you got to do. And then, so you can load it into your PLM and push it out, or I'm sure also there's probably software, middleware that will connect if there's something else from another, auditing body that will feed into it.
There are yes to both. Within Centric, specifically with factory management operations, we have developed it so that you can download the current requirements when you are at the Sheridan, when you have fast Wi-Fi, and then work in an offline mode while you're on the factory floor, and then it pops back up. So before you go on an inspection tour in the morning, you would get all the criteria that you have to meet today. And then you can just go through that as you're doing your inspections, as you're doing your management. And then the data would be uploaded at the end of the day. So as close to real time, because on the factory floor, it's often difficult to get, fast enough Wi-Fi to be uploading documents and things like that. Man, I just lost my train of thought because I had a second.
On software inclusions, things like that.
So, Centric is fully integratable with HIG, which was our first step into this ESG concept. We have another company that we haven't completely finalized the agreement yet, so I'm not going to say their name, although I'd love to. They're very impressive. That takes what HIG does and even goes a step further. So it's not just materials, and not to downplay HIG, I'm a big fan, but they talk about regulatory requirements. They talk about shipping requirements. They talk about everything in their function of a single source of truth with that whole ESG compliance and CSR compliance. And then we take that, hook it up through REST APIs into Centric, so that the people planning, designing, and developing product have real-time visibility into, am I crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's? Because it's not as simple anymore as just sketching out a shoe and faxing it to someone, which shares my age a little bit, but it's not that simple anymore, right? We have more requirements on our time and more legal requirements, and there's going to change constantly. So absolutely, we definitely work with vendors to integrate all that stuff.
And it's gonna get tougher too. I'm telling you,
Yep.
the switch from certifications are what we're dealing with now. We're even socializing to that, right? Getting more certifications from different bodies. But we're moving towards an LCA model where it is a holistic look. And Roger, from your perspective, and I know I don't want to get into what you're doing or how you're doing it, but just anecdotally, we asked, the industry, we just published our 2022 worker survey on sustainability. And one of the things that stood out was something like 60% more of companies are saying their customers are asking for more certifications, right? So it is the trust but verify type thing. Are you guys seeing that as well?
Yeah, especially, working with the brands that we do too. We have sourcing agreements with a lot of brands that sustainability is high on their radar. We started a sustainability initiative this year. We had very, some decent goals to kind of move us in the right direction. And we met those goals and we've accelerated it for 2023. And it's certainly something that we are looking forward to Centric being a part of it. But, all the partners that we work with have to be, our factory base. Everybody needs to be fully baked into this sustainability. Seth Campbell, the owner of our company, that's one of his babies too. And he's very much driving the force in the entire company. That sustainability is, down to how we operate our office,
Right.
Is important as a company initiative.
Yeah. And I can imagine if you have all your data inside the PLM, you can make decisions around making those right baby steps, because maybe the upper cost a little bit too much this cycle, but the insole you could do a little bit something on, right? So you can make those strategic choices about where you're focusing your effort based on cost and value to the consumer while still moving forward strategically. And I think that's what we're getting at in this age of knowing that. And maybe in the future, even having AI start to tell us and inform us and say, hey, like, you've got all this, maybe think about this. And it's like, pushing it to us to say, hey, take a look at this, not making let's not talk about robots taking over, but just, it's almost like the red light, green light, yellow light, where it's like a push out, just say, take a look at this. This could be interesting, right? Like, I think that's where we're heading on a lot of stuff, which is exciting.
We're working on it.
Yeah, you're working on it. Just don't let the computers take over, okay? Like, just a little bit. All the stuff we don't.
It's all
wanna-
about letting the software make you look smart.
There
And
you
that's
go.
the goal, right?
Take away all the things we don't want to do. None of the cool
Yep,
stuff.
exactly.
As we kind of wrap up, if anybody has questions, go ahead and drop those in now. But I do want to ask each of you to give kind of the top 3 insights or advices you have for 2023 as we come up. What do you think is going to happen? What are you preparing for? And then let's have some positive too. Like, what'll be interesting in terms of a positive for footwear in 2023. I'll start with Matt and then I'll go to Roger.
Give me the hard one first.
I want to give Roger time to think about it.
So I'll put on my prognostication cap here, and I'll start with what I'm already hearing. And what I'm seeing as I talk to customers and potential customers is really one of 2 tracks. And I don't know which is right. I think probably each could be right depending on the situation and the brand. But I'm seeing a lot of activity from potential customers who had been on the sidelines of PLM for years, who are jumping in now. And they're saying, we did accumulate some capital over the last couple of years, because they were a good couple of years. And we're anticipating a bit of a slowdown next year. So now's the time to shore up our infrastructure, to get smarter, to be ready to come out of this thing, in a better place. And then I'm seeing other customers saying, we're gonna batten down the hatches and we're gonna wait. And honestly, I understand both. I get it. I like to sell PLM software, so it's more fun to work with the customers who are full speed ahead and looking at infrastructure. But we're here for the long haul. We're here for the people who are maybe taking a more cautious look as well. So that's what I'm hearing right now, is going down those 2 paths. The second thing that I'm seeing is SKU rationalization. So really being smart about what is driving revenue and what is driving, more important than just top line revenue, but margin. What's keeping the lights on? Let's make sure we're doing that to the absolute best of our ability. because, this too shall pass. We're probably in for a rough couple of quarters at least, but no one knows for sure. But we've all been doing this long enough to see this roller coaster go up and down, in my case, many, many times, and it's going to come back up. So the being smart and, cutting the things that maybe their passion plays, we love, but maybe, one of the things I always tell people to do with Centric is when you have to kill something, and I love fail fast, right? When you realize it's not going to work, kill it. But if you have a PLM system, you don't waste all that effort. It can go into a future season. It can go into a holding pattern. It can sit there, and because it probably was a good idea, we're all smart people. When the time is right, bring it back, right? And you won't have lost the designs. You won't have lost the preliminary development. All that stuff will be there, which pays big dividends, I think, in a broader sense. So that's two that are top of mind. I don't know if I have a third for you right
All
now,
right.
but those are the two things when I'm on the phone all day long. That's
Hey,
what we're
take
talking
your own
about.
advice. Take those SKUs down from 3 to 2. buddy.
3 to 2.
Shrink it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roger, what are you thinking about in 23? What are some issues?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is very similar. I think the first thing, is you have to clearly define your goals for the year, right? And everyone in the company needs to know what those goals are and what the steps are to achieve them, right? If our goal is to batten down the hatches, then everyone in the team needs to know that it's batten down the hatches. If our goal is to do some risk and some, hold risk here, but go get here, everyone needs to be aligned with that. Don't do anything that doesn't meet your company goals. Get rid of all the extra stuff and focus on what really matters to you as far as the company goes, and make sure everyone is communicated with that effectively throughout the organization, right? So the second thing I would say is the last 2-3 years, if we didn't learn everything about the supply chain and what our pain points are, if we didn't learn everything about our infrastructure and what our pain points are, then shame on us, right? Everything that could have gone wrong did. So this is the time to take our learnings, to your point, and to take them and build better infrastructure, better processes, better, what did we do right and what did we do wrong? And how are we building it out during this year so that when it goes back up like this, we're ready for it because we've solidified all of the different things that go along with it. And that's really, again, understanding risk reward. We had a plan, we had a great partnership with our leadership team of knowing if this port strike might happen, what's our plan? If the rail isn't going to work, what's our plan? And we were able to execute the plan without having a lot of hem and haw and what are we going to do and this and that. We had a hurricane preparedness plan already, which allowed us to execute faster when things did actually happen. And that is one of the things that I think we need to continue to do. And the third thing is, to me, is really be transparent and open with your partners about kind of where you stand, how we work on this together, how we can work on the short term versus a long-term situation. Because, whether it's your factory partners that are participating in the same problems that you are, your warehouse partners, your freight forwarders, all of those people are invested in our long-term success. So let's have some discussions on what that looks like for both of us, Those are the things that we're working on. Clear goals, build out better processes and infrastructure. Using PLM is a good example. We're fully invested in that. We're full steam ahead. And then obviously having great partners, retail partners too. So.
Great. Well, I think we're back on Space Mountain again, going for another turn.
Mm-hmm.
Around the bend on the roller coaster, but I think those points are really well taken about focus, clarity, having tough conversations, but having them now. Like, don't get down the line with your partners. I think agility in not just execution of supply chain, but like relationships, right? Sometimes we need to say, we're all not going to make a lot of money this year, but we're going to keep the lights on, and the next year we'll all do well together again, right? So how do we do that? And I think the people who will succeed will be those folks, and the people who stumble along the way, didn't learn their lessons, as Roger said, and aren't using software like PLM when Centric is using to help make those better decisions in real time and make quick decisions. I do like, Matt, what you're saying about like wasted work, right? There's so many times where we scrub something, we throw it off and we think, well, that didn't work this cycle, but like, God, like it feels like the 90s all over again with the clothes that people had to just hold on to their information from the 90s and the PLM. They could it's just like going back to your dad's closet and pulling out a coat, right? Like, it's all sitting there. You didn't lose anything. You didn't, and maybe too, if you had a designer leave, it's something still sitting there that you could pull in. You look
Yeah, I
back
mean,
at the cycle.
you own that IP, right? They designed it for you, but they moved on. But if it's in a system, you own it. And I've, in my past, prior to selling PLM, I had so many discussions at different brands that started with, what would be perfect for this request? Remember that thing you were working on like 18 months ago? And somebody say, oh yeah, that was awesome. This fits that perfectly. Just to be able to filter and say, hey, yeah, it was a men's sandal and it was $39.99. Oh, here's 4 of them at different stages of development. This one's 80% done. Let's pick it up.
That's
Right. To be able to do that and save that work. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's great. I love talking about the efficiencies and the ideas of what you can do if you have your data centralized and you have, I think Roger's point's really well taken, your team focused, right? It takes a focused team and it takes a software that works for everything to go together and good relationships.
So it's easy to focus when you're all using the same data.
Look, we have a hit rate target. One of our goal, we set our goals. We have a hit rate target as a company, and there it is. It's right there in the system to measure your success against your hit rate target.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I as a worker, I'm sure it can be frightening if you see a lot of red, but at least you know where you stand and you start working on where you can focus. And I think that's encouraging too, because I think more and more workers want direction from managers and they want to know that they're doing a good job and they want not to waste their time. And they, and especially on sustainability, I felt there's so much purpose around that of making sure that we're doing all the right things for the right reasons, and having something like that direct them to know, like they're not just guessing, but there are some sound data behind that when they can look at that. So I think we can keep going all day.
Yeah, I could too. I was going to say the one key thing that I see with a lot of my customers, if not all, is that having those KPIs can be intimidating, right? You're like, wait, everyone's going to know what I'm doing. Everyone's going to know that I'm behind. But there's a shift when you help everyone on the team realize that you're all on the same team and you start, and I've seen it myself, especially in the product development teams, because the skills are similar regardless of gender or product type, right? Saying, hey, team A, you're 80% in the red, right? And we've got a commercialization deadline, but team B is 80% in the green. Anybody got some bandwidth? Can you just take on 3 styles? And it takes, in my experience, it takes a little while, but the first time a person raises their hand, either virtually or in person, and says, yeah, you know what, I can do that, things really start clicking because everyone does realize we're all on the same team. We're marching towards the same goals, and no one's pointing fingers and saying you're late because you're bad. They're saying you're late because there's issues. Let's help you with them. So it's a little bit too psychological, but I'd see it a lot.
There you go. There you go. We are nearly at the end of our hour allotted time, and I appreciate everybody joining today. If you had any further questions about Centric PLM and why numerous footwear companies are adopting them, I mean, obviously we talked a lot about it today, but it's down to the bottom line, honestly. Don't keep guessing and don't keep making risky decisions. Like, have some understanding of the risk that you are. I mean, every decision's a risk, but how do we manage that better? And how do we lower that to make better decisions and know that? And I think we covered a lot of that today. Roger, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom from where you are now at BBC, which is a wonderful company, from its founder, and now with Josue as the CEO there. And then also your background in retail too is so important to balance. I'm sure that, I'm sure they're grateful for you to be in the room to balance those conversations about, yeah, but like, here's what we're thinking, but a retailer's probably thinking this, right? Like, and I think that's
Yeah,
super
and,
valuable.
you know, Josue had a retail background too, and I think that's, from ops guys especially, that, we're supposed to be the temperate people.
Right.
So we can see both sides, but,
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. And Matt, thanks to you and Centric again for powering these conversations that we have that are so important to our footwear community and our members. I'll give you kind of last word or last summation if you'd like to wrap it up for us today.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to you both. Roger's running a really good crew over there. I've enjoyed meeting him over the last few months, and I think they're going to do great things. But yeah, it's all about transparency and visibility, right? So love to help you all out. Anybody has any Centric questions or PLM in general, I'm happy to answer them. Obviously, I have no problem talking. So just hit me up, and I'm looking forward to the next time.
Awesome. And folks, you can email me, apolk@fdra.org, or our main email line, info@fdra.org, if you want to ask Matt any specific questions or want to do a demo. I always tell people, if you've watched any of the webinars over the last 10 years I've been doing, I always tell this, don't wait until you have a problem to do a demo. Do a demo now, just so you have an understanding of what's possible. Matt's not expecting you to make a decision on the dime, but
No.
it's important that you see what's happening so that when something does pop up on your radar, that something a PLM could solve, you already have his number. He knows who you are. He knows your product type, and they can move a lot faster to help you if you wanted to adopt it. So
Well said.
yeah, so do the demo now. In December, perfect time.
Mhm.
It's gonna be a little bit slower, I think, hopefully for a lot of folks. And as we hit the holiday season, we're thankful for all our FDRA members and the footwear companies out there, and especially the workers on the front line that are working over the holiday season where customers may not be super nice. So one, let's all be a little kinder, hopefully. Two, I'm really thankful for Centric and their support and our many partner support across the industry that help us be the association that we are and really provide value and hopefully help companies find solutions and move forward. And then I hope and I pray everybody has a great holiday season. Everybody's healthy and safe with your families. I hope and pray sales are up for the holiday season and inventory moves, and we can get in past these I words into something a little bit better. The G word, the growth word, really soon. But again, Roger, thanks very much for joining us, and Matt, thanks for you and Centric powering this as well. Again, if questions on anything we talked about today or to do that demo, info@fdra.org is the best line. Hope you have a great afternoon. Appreciate you joining us. Until next time, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.